I'd just staggered off a red-eye flight from a grueling 4-week stint at the docks in Seattle, my bones aching, my clothes reeking of oil and salt. All I wanted was to crash on my couch with a cold beer and pretend the world didn't exist for a solid 48 hours. But as I pulled into my driveway in the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, Oregon, on that chilly October morning in 2024, I spotted it. A crisp, white envelope pinned to my front door, glowing like a bad omen against the faded blue paint. My gut twisted before I even touched it. Nothing good ever comes from those HOA letters, and this one was no exception. I ripped it open, and there it was $600, bold as brass, for unauthorized vehicle storage. My fishing boat, my pride and joy, parked neatly in my own driveway as it had been for years, was suddenly a crime. No warning, no courtesy note, just a cold, hard fine dated the exact day I'd left for work. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. This was personal. Let me back up. My name's Nate Carver, and I've lived in Maple Ridge for 8 years, keeping my head down, paying my dues, and maintaining my property like a good neighbor. But the HOA here, led by Victoria Hensley, runs this place like her personal fiefdom. Victoria's in her late 40s, always polished to a sheen, with a smile that could curdle milk. She speaks softly, but her words carry the weight of someone who knows she holds all the cards. A couple of months back, I made the mistake of crossing her at a community meeting. I'd stood up, heart pounding, and suggested we let kids use the community field for pickup games instead of treating it like a sacred relic. The room buzzed with approval. Parents nodded. A few even clapped, but Victoria shut me down faster than a guillotine. "Mr. Carver," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "you're out of order. This matter is closed." She flicked off my mic with a smirk, leaving me standing there, face burning, as the room fell silent. I should have known she'd hold a grudge. The fine wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a declaration of war. The letter included grainy photos of my boat, snapped from odd angles like someone had been skulking around my property. I checked my security cameras, and sure enough, there was Paul Grayson, Victoria's lapdog, sneaking around at dawn, snapping pictures with a shaky hand, looking over his shoulder like a thief. The footage was almost comical. Paul, a wiry guy in his 50s, practically tiptoeing, his face a mask of nerves. But the humor faded when I realized this was orchestrated. They'd waited until I was 2,000 miles away to strike. I could have paid the $600 and moved on, but something in me snapped. I'm a logistics manager at the port. Rules and regulations are my bread and butter. If Victoria wanted to play dirty, I'd beat her at her own game. I dug out the HOA handbook, a dusty tome most folks use as a doorstop, and pored over it until my eyes burned. At 3 a.m., nursing my fourth coffee, I found it on page 47, a clause allowing voluntary contributions to the community fund. No limits, no restrictions, just vague language about enhancing quality of life. A plan formed, reckless but brilliant. I went to the bank at 9 a.m. sharp, withdrew $1,200, and got a cashier's check made out to the Maple Ridge HOA. Then I crafted a letter so dripping with polite venom it could have been framed. "Dear Board, as a logistics professional, I value fair and consistent rule enforcement. In that spirit, I'm pleased to contribute $1,200 to ensure equitable community management, especially for residents away on business. Sincerely, Nate Carver." I dropped it off at the HOA office, sliding it through the mail slot, but not before knocking. Paul answered, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Just a little gift for the community," I said, grinning like a fox. His face went from red to purple, and he stammered something about appreciating my generosity. I walked away whistling, knowing I'd just lit a fuse. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived, and I nearly choked laughing. The HOA was gratefully accepting my contribution but demanded forms, waivers, and a review to ensure I wasn't trying to unduly influence them. They'd already cashed the check, though, which made their bureaucratic gymnastics even funnier. But then the neighborhood turned weird. My neighbor, Mrs. Larson, asked if I was feuding with the HOA. A guy I barely knew cornered me about community harmony. Even the mail carrier gave me side-eye. Victoria was spinning a narrative, painting me as the villain. Then came the call. Victoria's voice slithered through the phone, all honey and ice. "Nate, we appreciate your contribution, but we need to ensure it's in good faith. We'll discuss this at a special board meeting next week. Her tone wasn't rattled, it was calculated, like she was 3 moves ahead in a chess game I'd just started playing. My stomach nodded. Was I in over my head? The meeting was a circus. The community center was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Victoria sat at the head table, flanked by board members like a queen with her court. Paul scribbled notes, avoiding my gaze. She opened with a 10-minute sermon about proper procedures, framing my donation as a potential scandal. When I stood to speak, I cut through her nonsense. Victoria, maybe we should ask why you find a guy who wasn't even home to defend himself. The room froze. A few gasps, a snicker from the back. I pressed on, citing the handbook's clear language on voluntary contributions, no approval needed. Then Mr. Harold Brooks, a grizzled 80-year-old, stood up. 6 months ago, I got a $250 fine for my fence being an inch too tall. Spent a whole day measuring it with a ruler, my knees screaming. Did anyone ask my intentions? The crowd erupted, and others chimed in petty fines for mailbox colors, car parking angles. Victoria's composure cracked, her face flushing as she banged her gavel. They accepted my donation but vowed new donation relays a hollow victory, but a start. I thought I'd won a round, but Victoria wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, violation notices hit my mailbox like clockwork. $30 for grass too long, $40 for a driveway smudge, $25 for a loose gutter. Death by 1,000 cuts. I fixed each issue, paid the fines, and upgraded my cameras, sensing escalation. Then came the morning I woke to a car horn blaring. My neighbor stood by my truck, pointing to an empty spot where my boat should have been. It was now on the street, blocking the sidewalk, with a new $600 citation under my wiper. The photo showed it parked at 4:15 a.m. My blood ran cold. I hadn't moved it. The security footage was chilling. At 3:50 a.m., a truck crept into my driveway, headlights off. Paul and a stranger hitched my boat, Paul's hands shaking, his head swiveling at every sound: a cat, a breeze. They moved it to the street, snapped photos, and Paul placed the citation, then fled. This wasn't harassment. It was criminal. I wanted to drag the boat back right then, but I stopped myself. Evidence was power, and timing was everything. I called the HOA, paid the fine calmly, and told Paul the first just wanted to respect community standards. His silence screamed guilt. For 10 days, I stewed, watching my boat sit on the curb, my anger simmering. But I was waiting for the monthly meeting where I'd drop my bomb. The room was a powder keg, standing room only. Victoria opened with her usual pomp, but her eyes darted to me, betraying nerves. When my turn came, I plugged in my laptop, heart hammering. 3 weeks ago, my boat was moved overnight, earning me a $600 fine, I said, projecting the citation. My cameras caught something interesting. I played the footage. Paul and his accomplice, clear as day, stealing my boat. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Paul sank in his chair, face in hands. Then I showed a second clip. Victoria, a week earlier, pointing at my boat, saying, "This needs to be handled." The room exploded. Victoria leapt up, screaming about context, but the crowd drowned her out, shouting for her resignation. Harold Brooks stood again. "Victoria, you trespassed and framed a neighbor. That's not leadership, that's a crime." Applause shook the walls. Then came the game changer. A quiet voice called from the back, Sarah Klein, the HOA's mousy assistant. She met me the next day at a diner, sunglasses on, hands trembling as she slid me a USB drive. "I copied emails before Victoria told me to delete them," she whispered. "She planned this for months, ever since you challenged her." The emails were dynamite. Victoria's orders to Paul, timestamps, even a note saying, "Move it at 4:15 a.m. Exactly. Sarah was risking her job, driven by guilt over Paul's manipulation. "He's weak, not evil," she said. Victoria threatened his home. At the emergency board meeting, I laid it all bare: videos, emails, printouts. The silence was deafening. Victoria's deflections claiming community interests fell flat. The board voted unanimously: her resignation, Paul's too, and a police referral. Paul sent an apology email, admitting coercion. Victoria resigned in a bitter screed, sold her house, and vanished by November. The neighborhood exhaled. Meetings became open forums, kids played on the field, and the board added term limits and transparency. 6 weeks later, I got a certificate thanking me for my $1,200, now funding a dog park. A month after that, a postcard arrived. No sender. I picked the wrong side, but you showed me courage. I'm free. I stood in my driveway, boat back in place, kids' laughter echoing. I send $1,200 yearly now, not as a weapon, but for playgrounds and picnics. The real lesson? Fight smart, not loud. Expose corruption with their own rules, and you don't just win, you rebuild. So what would you do? Pay the fine and stay quiet, or risk everything to expose a tyrant? Would you trust a whistleblower like Sarah, or suspect a trap? And when power's stripped bare, do you think people like Victoria ever learn, or just slink off to ruin another community? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories where the little guy fights back. I'm reading every comment. Let's hear your take.